Welcome to Call to Mind Live, Dispatches from Within, Youth Speak Out. This program is a co-production between WFDD and Call to Mind, American Public Media's initiative to foster new conversations around mental health. This virtual event is part of the Wellbeing's Youth Mental Health Project and its Wellbeing's Tour, a national initiative led by public media organization WETA in Washington, D.C. I'm Gabriel Maizanabe, and I'll be the host for this afternoon. I'm WFDD's Hive program manager. Hive is our education program. It started way before my time in 2010 with a radio camp, which was a one-week intensive camp for middle school students who were interested in radio and journalism. They would come in, learn how to do a story, and then that story would go on air. A year after that, so in like 2011, we decided that we wanted to expand the reach, and we started working with high school students. We created Radio 101. And when I came in on board in 2017, we actually started working with a high school here in Winston-Salem, R.J. Reynolds High School, and have the class embedded in the school system so the kids could explore subjects, they could do stories about the things that matter to them and actually get class credit for it. So when this initiative came to mind and we were able to do this event, we jumped on the opportunity because we always value the voices of young people in the community. And we do have a great event today. We have amazing guests that we're going to hear from. But before we get to all of that, let's learn a little bit more about our partners.
WETA, with a coalition of partners, welcomes you to the Wellbeing's Youth Mental Health Project. Hi, I'm Bill Pullman, and I'm honored to be with you as we launch this national campaign from public media. Wellbeing's is a groundbreaking project at a very important point in time. Mental illness disproportionately affects our young people and the most disadvantaged populations among us. The growing mental health movement has set the stage for dramatic change, to raise awareness, to reduce stigma, to focus on prevention and early intervention, and the promise of more research for new treatments. Together, we can bring mental illness and discrimination out of the shadows, and it's not a day too soon. So thank you for being here today.
The signature documentary series in the Wellbeing's campaign is Ken Burns Presents Hiding in Plain Sight, Youth Mental Illness, produced and directed by Ewers Brothers Productions and written by David Blistein. The film will explore through lived experiences the youth mental health crisis in our country. Currently in production, this 4-hour documentary film will air on PBS stations in spring 2022.
Wellbeings.org and #Wellbeings will be adding new content every week, including
Brave Teens, a digital feature-length documentary that offers a candid portrait of the lives of teens who have decided it's time to talk about their mental health challenges, to support one another, and to end stigma.
Out of the Dark, a short-form digital series that profiles the stories of 3 young people who faced the greatest mental health challenge of their lives and found strength they never knew they had.
Little Actions Make a Big Difference. A new animated series shares easy-to-use, science-based tools, actions, and tactics to support your social-emotional health and well-being. Almost 13, a short film about Hayden Hunstable, who the world lost to suicide in the middle of COVID stay-at-home orders just 4 days before his 13th birthday, and his family's mission to raise awareness and to increase communication to prevent youth suicide.
PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs engage high school journalism students as correspondents that report on youth mental health for more than 150 high schools across 46 states.
Mental health affects all of us. We all experience various levels of mental health and well-being through our lifetime. According to the CDC, half of us will experience a mental illness at some point in our lives. Call to Mind's goal is to bring this topic out into the open, to get people talking, to increase understanding, and using all of our media platforms, news, shows, live events, podcasts. We are engaging the American public in a conversation about mental health.
If you've been following the news, on Tuesday, the U.S. Surgeon General issued an advisory on the state of youth mental health. And actually, even before the pandemic, 1 in 3 high school students reported persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. And with the pandemic, the rates of depression and anxiety have gone up. For our Radio 101 class, we actually conducted a survey of about 1,600 students in the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School District, and we gathered that actually half of them said that they felt extremely low or sad for longer than 2 weeks. So these are issues that are in the top of all of our minds, and it's really important to have these conversations. And we're going to start this with a little bit talking about a little bit of self-worth and body image. So let me introduce the panel. First, we have our Radio 101 student reporters who work on a story about body weight and body image, and eating disorders. First, we have Sarah Bettis.
Hi.
We also have Kelly Brenner. And we also have Sarah Rhodes Cox. And to also give us a little bit of context and this connection between eating disorders and mental health, we brought Dr. Linda Nicolotti. She's the assistant professor of pediatric psychology at Brenner's Children's Hospital, which is part of Atrium Health, Wake Forest Baptist System. Welcome to all of you. And a quick note to our audience, we do want to hear from you. This is a live conversation, so you can submit your questions either through the Zoom Q&A, or if you're watching it through Facebook Live, you can use the comments there as well. And we are going to be talking about some hard topics, and this can be triggering for some people, but know that there is help available for you at all times. You can reach out to the crisis text line at 741741, and you'll be connected with a crisis counselor. Or you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That is 1-800-273-8255. And you'll be connected to someone 24/7 every day of the year. So let me start with our student reporters. You girls work on a story about eating disorders, and at the beginning of the semester, I did give you the assignment of we're going to be working on issues about mental health, but I gave you complete leeway in terms of what is it that you wanted to look into. So I'm kind of curious, Sarah Rhodes, if you can talk to me a little bit about the reasoning behind going after this story, and what did you learn through the reporting process?
Yeah, so I feel like eating disorders have become a lot more common in teenage girls recently, but I don't think that this is something society likes to pay attention to, because eating disorders aren't always pretty. But I feel like if you have one, it is such a significant part of your life that's why we chose to do this story, because we wanted to shed some light on that.
And Dr. Nicolotti, just anecdotally, based on your experience, have you seen this? Is there an increase in kids coming in with eating disorders, with body image issues?
Yes, Gabriel, we have seen quite a significant increase over this past year and a half of eating disorder diagnoses, as well as body image disturbance. We see increased hospitalizations for eating disorders as well.
I want to play a really quick excerpt from the story that you girls work on, and then we can talk about it. So let's take a listen.
I always think I'm fat, I'm ugly, and I'm stupid. That's always the first thoughts, and it's almost like it's not me saying it. It's in my head, it's someone else saying that to me. But it's just, those are such common things, and people saying, oh, well, you're not fat, you're beautiful. You can be both. There's no way that you can't be both.
you're not fat, you're beautiful. I love how the student that you girls talked to framed that dichotomy. And actually, as I was listening to this for the first time, I couldn't help but to think, I've done that. Like, I've told people, oh, don't worry about it. You're not fat, you're fine. And I bet that a lot of people out there who are listening to this right now are also thinking, wait, am I like hurting people when I say this kind of thing? So I wonder, Dr. Nicolotti, if you can talk to us a little bit about, that line, that balance between healthy body weight and also all the pressures that we feel from society, and how can all of that can compound to problems that we carry?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think youth and teenagers and young adolescents are particularly at risk from messaging they get from media, social media. I think a lot of the images out there project an appearance that really is unrealistic and not real life for people. But yet, teenagers, you all can maybe speak to this. Social media is such an important part of life these days. And I know a lot of teenagers spend a lot of time on different social media platforms, and they're getting messaging, either direct or indirect, about how they should look, about what is important in terms of being liked by other people. And so I think that influences how adolescents and teenagers view themselves and view their appearance.
So I also have a question for Dr. Nicolotti. What makes an eating disorder a mental health disorder?
Mm-hmm. Right, so that's a good question. A lot of people might not like certain things about the way they look or about their appearance or their weight. It becomes a disorder when it starts becoming more of a problem for the person. So it might start affecting, in particular, health, when people are either restricting what they're eating, so not eating enough to just support their daily energy needs. If they're vomiting to lose weight, that can also affect health. And the longer that goes on, the more health can be affected by that. So, there's also cognitions, thinking patterns that go along with eating disorders. There's a real preoccupation with appearance and weight. There might be an element of obsessive type thinking, so thoughts that are just really hard not to think about. Those thoughts are just there. It's hard to get rid of those thoughts. It's hard to think a different way. People also will start to engage in, really rigid type of behaviors or compulsive behaviors around their eating or appearance, such as arranging their food a particular way, only being able to eat at certain times, repeatedly checking their weight. So any of those kind of behaviors might be warning signs.
And you mentioned social media, and I think that that's been on the news a lot. Actually, there was a Senate hearing on Wednesday where the CEO of Instagram was grilled by senators about how they interact with young people. And actually, one of the things that came out from that hearing is that a lot of the senators, they created fake accounts, and they would like maybe like an influencer, like some post that would have some unhealthy relationship with food, and then on the discover section of Instagram, they would quickly start to see like more and more of this to sort of like reinforce that message. And I think that it's great to have the students here, because you girls are actually, you are living through that. And while there's been a lot of talk about, what happens with Facebook and teenagers, you're not on Facebook, but you are on Instagram, right? And you are on Snapchat, and you're on TikTok. So I wonder, Kelly, if you can tell me a little bit about what is it that you see with your peers when it comes to like social media, and also like what did you find? Because in your story, you mentioned a little bit about how social media has impacted like this person that you interviewed. So tell me a little bit about this relationship with social media, and how do you think that is impacting you guys as a whole?
Yeah, so when I look on social media like Instagram, I'll see just my friends posting. But a lot of and I'm guilty of this too. When I think teenage girls post on Instagram, we get our hair done, or we do our hair not naturally, and we put on makeup, and we have this really cute outfit on, which is great. But then when other people see those photos, and I've done it too, is you start comparing yourself to that person. You're like, well, I don't look like that when I wear that outfit, or I don't look like that when my hair does that, or my makeup doesn't look as good as hers. And so you start comparing yourself to that person, and I think mentally it can like do something to you, and you start feeling bad about yourself and saying, well, you're not pretty, or you're ugly, like all of these things. And I think it can really take a toll on yourself, which could cause eating disorders or like body dysmorphia and all of these things. So,
Dr. Nicolotti, is there can we make a connection like between you know, actual social media and like these feelings that like Kelly is talking about?
Yes, I think definitely there's a connection there. I think research has borne that out, but also you all have these experiences of yourselves and of your peers as well. I really do think that social media, you know, is built to have certain algorithms to keep people connected to the social media platform. And I don't know that there's always thought given to what impact that's going to have on, you know, impressionable adolescents and teenagers who are really in the phase of figuring out, you know, who you are as a person, you know, what is important to you. And it's also a very social time of life, and being accepted and liked by your peers is really important.
Now, I have here a question from the audience, and Beth, she asked, how is social media even more damaging than regular media that like she grew up with? And I mean, I'm kind of wondering because I mean, we've always seen, you know, these pictures of impossible bodies in like magazines or like on TV, but what is so different about social media than traditional media? What do you think?
That's a good question. I think adolescents and teenagers are probably spending a lot more time on social media than regular media. So, you know, there's that aspect of things. I think it's a lot more difficult for parents and caretakers to control social media versus regular media. And I also think, you know, these algorithms and the way that the platforms are designed to keep people hooked in. So, I mean, that happens with regular media too, but I think it is more impactful on social media platforms.
And I have another question from a listener in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They ask, how can I deprogram my teen, you know, from those misguided messages and, you know, help them believe in themselves? Is there something that like you can do?
I think there's certainly things you can do. I don't know, it may be hard for people who are spending a lot of time on social media. However, I think limiting your exposure to social media is really important. I just read that Instagram now has this feature, I don't know if you have all seen it, but I think it's called Take a Break or something like that, where, you know, you can activate that feature and take a break from the social media platform. So I think that's really healthy, is to not be on social media all of the time, to have other interests, other activities, you know, where you see your friends in person and do things with them in person versus mostly through social media. And I think the pandemic probably has also had a negative effect on this, because last year, everybody was at home for the majority of the year. Most people were at home doing school. And so there was a lot more access to social media. That was the way people were connecting with friends and peers and the world. And so I think a combination of those factors have, you know, have created our national crisis in mental health. But certainly spending time with your kids, I think, is important. Doing family activities, trying to have family meals, trying to connect with your adolescent and teenager, figuring out what's going on with their lives. I think all of those things can be really important. And the message that parents give are really important too, that your self-worth is not just based on your appearance or how other people perceive you or how you think other people perceive you. There are a lot more facets to a person that make them special and important.
I want to play another excerpt from the story that you girls work on. This time we're actually going to listen to Elle, the student that you interview, talking about the first time that she was actually able to say it out loud that she had a problem. So let's listen to it.
Remember, it was a Thursday. It was during track season, so it was probably like mid early-ish spring. And I went in, and the doctor was like, okay, like, mom's gonna go out and we can have a little chat. She asked me how I was doing, drugs, drinking, which no, sex, no. And then I was talking about some of the mental stuff that I was going through, and she was like, okay, like, is there anything else? And I'm like, yeah, there's one thing. And it took me so long to be able to articulate it, even start articulating it. Because I was like, oh, I should not have done this. And well, I have to tell you now. Well, okay. And I finally was like, I had to do a motion with my fingers because I couldn't, I didn't know how to say it. And I was in tears, choked up trying to say it. And it was Thursday in spring.
This was one of the most powerful moments of the entire interview, and I think that before we even move forward with this, I do want to ask Dr. Nicolotti, because there is a difference between an officially diagnosed eating disorder and just having an unhealthy relationship with food. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that difference.
So, what would make it an eating disorder would be a pattern of behavior where you're dissatisfied with your body image and appearance, maybe even misperceiving how you look. So some people feel like they look fat, but nobody else thinks that. Or people hyper-focus on part of their body, but nobody else notices that as being a problem. So there's that cognitive piece where you're focused on your appearance, your body image, your weight, and it's often hard not to focus on that. There's also the behavioral piece of that, where you start doing behaviors that go along with that thought pattern. So you may start restricting food or exercising more or taking your weight repeatedly every day, multiple times a day, every time you eat. You start to be very rigid about what you will eat. You might cut things out of your diet, not really to be healthy, but more to lose weight. You might cut out entire food groups with an eating disorder. And then with food restriction, there's usually also weight loss that comes with that. And so when someone gets below a healthy weight or loses weight too quickly, that would indicate an eating disorder, particularly if they have these thought patterns and behaviors that go along with it.
And also another thing that you just happen, the ones that work on this story happen to be 3 girls, but this is not something that is just affecting women, right? No. It doesn't recognize gender.
No, males can be affected as well. So certain eating disorders are more common in females than males, but in terms of the behaviors and the thoughts about weight and behaviors and thoughts that lead up to eating disorders, males are just as likely as females to experience that. So yeah, many males might struggle with an eating disorder as well. And with avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, which is a type of feeding and eating disorder that does not entail all of the negative thought patterns about body image. Usually there's other reasons people are losing weight, such as, anxiety about choking or something of that nature, or anxiety about vomiting. That is just as common in males as females.
And one of the things that I think that was most powerful about this piece that we listened to is this inability to put it into words, right? And why is it so tough to talk about it?
Well, I think sometimes it's just difficult to acknowledge to another person that you've been struggling with something. A lot of times with eating disorders, people are secretive about that. They'll keep that to themselves. They'll try to hide the behaviors and the weight loss. So that can be part of an eating disorder in and of itself. I also think there are thought patterns that go along with having an eating disorder where, many people with an eating disorder will deny that they really have an eating disorder or deny that they have a problem, not just to other people, but to themselves. They will rationalize their changes in weight and thought patterns and behavior patterns around eating and weight so that they may at first not even recognize it. I also think there's still a stigma around having mental health issues. So I think some people are going to find that difficult to talk about.
And I have a question here from a listener. Chris in Winston-Salem says, I'd like to know how to effectively comfort someone when they share that they are struggling with eating disorders.
That's a great question. Yeah, friends might be most likely to have this conversation first with their other friends. Or maybe you might be the most likely one to notice that another friend is struggling with an eating disorder. Maybe you notice they're not eating lunch at school, or you notice they're losing weight before their family even does. So I think being empathetic, listening, not judging them. I think it's hard for peers and friends because you walk a fine line of wanting to maintain your friend's confidence and also maybe wanting to help them by telling someone about it. So I think if you're really worried about a friend, if you're worried that they've gotten into a danger zone with how they're eating and losing weight potentially, or if they're binging or purging, it probably is in their best interest, even if they don't want you to do this, to tell a trusted adult that does have the capacity to get them the help that they need.
Yeah, and but so you also mentioned that people tend to be really secretive about this and sometimes even deny it, right? So any tips on how do you create those safe spaces where people are actually going to move past that barrier of I'm not going to tell you about this?
I think it's important to create opportunities to have conversations. So just making time for it, making space for it, doing it in a way where you're not rushed or distracted with something else. I think when you express that you really care about somebody and you notice that they seem to be struggling and give them an opening, then oftentimes people will be more likely to feel that they can trust you and talk to you about something that's difficult.
And I have here another question from the audience. Jason is actually wondering if Kelly, if you could talk a little bit about, you mentioned something about social media and the things that you see in there, but what is the role that influencers play in all of this?
Yeah, I think influencers play a super big part. Everyone follows influencers on Instagram, subscribes to their YouTube, follows them on TikTok, and all of that. So you see them 24/7, but you only see what they post on social media. But usually what they post is, like I said, with their hair done and makeup, and their background is so it's usually their bedroom and it's always clean. And for some people that may be true. I know for me it is not. And so it's an unrealistic thing. And since they're an influencer, they're supposed to be influencing you and showing you products that they love or the lifestyle that they have. But in reality, it's an unrealistic lifestyle, you know? And so I think a lot of times you compare yourself to that influencer and you're like, well, I don't have that outfit. And like I said, the same thing, I don't look like that. And so I think you really just start comparing yourself to them. But I think influencers, it's bigger because you want to be like them so much because they have this great life and these great friends, and you're jealous of that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is the hard thing about doing this type of events is that I could talk to you guys for like hours and just like keep coming with more and more questions. But I mean, we do have to pivot to the next segment here today. But I do want to thank our panel, Dr. Linda Nicolotti. Thank you so much, and also our student reporters, Sarah Bettis, Kelly Brenner, and Sarah Rhodes Cox. Thank you so much. And before we move on to the next topic, we do have a couple of messages from our partners. We are going to share some information about our well-being tours. And also we have a special preview of a new film, executive produced by Ken Burns. It's titled Hiding in Plain Sight, Youth Mental Health, and it's coming to PBS in 2022. And this film looks at the experiences of young people living with mental health conditions as well as their loved ones. So stay right there because we'll be right back.
It's time to change the conversation about mental health.
When you know something is wrong.
When you feel alone. When you can't explain what hurts.
When every day is a struggle.
When you can't ask for help.
When your friend or family member seems fine on the outside.
But hurts on the inside.
Sometimes I feel as though I'm the only one that feels. But I know that's not true.
We can change.
We can change.
We can change.
We can make a difference.
There's power in our difference.
We can support each other.
We can fight stigma.
We say it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay to have a mental health condition.
We all want to feel heard.
To find hope.
And to live in a world without stigma.
Without discrimination.
And we are a force to be reckoned with.
I am not what happened to me.
I am how I overcame it.
Stand with us.
And discrimination in mental health.
You can see the person, not the condition.
You can build understanding.
You can play your part.
The conversation changes with me.
With me.
With me.
We are well-beings.
We are all well-beings.
When you're a teenager, you're at a certain stage in your life where you're kind of like a beginner. It's kind of like a first try at everything in life. And when something abrupt like someone you know dying from suicide happens, it hits like a wrecking ball. Everyone is different. Very different. It's very difficult to understand what to do from there.
I never really got a chance to explore my identity until I moved here. The community here is so much more accepting. I started to wear more feminine clothes. Started to wear makeup every day. It was good at first, but the day I went to school with pink hair, my car ended up getting vandalized and someone wrote queer on the back windshield. And there's a lot of non-binary kids that are depressed. It's not a symptom of being non-binary, it's a symptom of being marginalized by a society that doesn't accept us.
I think everyone thinks, not my kid. You know, this won't happen to my kid.
The first time they ever found out, they found empty pill bottles in my bag. I think they just hoped that I was just testing things out. They grounded me and they took my phone away. It didn't do anything. It didn't matter how many consequences I got, nothing was enough to stop me from taking what I wanted. My life was gonna end one way, and that was being addicted to drugs, so why not start now?
I was sort of eating for comfort, and then I would get upset at how much I ate, feel ashamed, and I would have to find a way to get rid of it, and I would just exercise to burn off that same amount of calories. I would wake up in the middle of the night while my roommate was sleeping, and I would start working out. And that's sort of how it spiraled at first. I spend a lot of time in the grocery store when I go. It's overwhelming. You don't have to do drugs and alcohol, but you do have to eat. And you have to eat every day. So food is not really something that I can escape.
I think it's so hard to find an Indigenous person that hasn't dealt with mental illness or some sort of abuse. That's in me, that's within my DNA and myself, and that's something that I have to deal with. Why I wasn't taught my language was because it was literally beaten out of my great-grandparents. The things my ancestors went through, it's shown through alcohol abuse, addictions, non-stable families, toxic relationships. That's the burden that Indigenous youth deal with every day. You're just born into it. Birthright. So not only is trauma embedded in my DNA, but so is resilience. So I know for a fact that my ancestors and my elders, they're rooting for me and they want me to do good. I'll share my story over and over again. I'll go through, those emotions like a million times if it helps one person. In some ways it heals that little scar, it takes away from it.
That looks like a powerful documentary, and one of the things I like about it, and one of the things I like about our Radio 101 program is this bottom-up approach, in the sense of whenever you hear these stories about anything that relates to youth, even like NPR or anything, it's always an academic or an expert talking about this issue that is affecting young people, and it's sort of like flip the script and then have the people who are in the midst of it just sharing what is it that they're going through and being the ones who are reporting on everything that is happening. So with that, we are going to open the next portion of our discussion today. I have here with me Radio 101's reporters Chloe Patterson, hello, and also Shailene Sebastian. And we also have some experts again to help us understand a little bit more about like the connection between the topic at hand, which is going to be substance use, and like the mental health aspect of it. We have first Dr. Wanda Boone. She's the Executive Director of Together for Resilient Youth. And Dr. Dawn O'Malley. She's the Senior Director of Clinical Services at Cross North Communities for Children. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
And I want to remind the audience that this is a live discussion, so you can submit your questions and I'll try to get them answered. You can use the Zoom Q&A, or if you're watching this on Facebook, you can just submit it through a Facebook comment. We are monitoring all of that stuff. And we are going to be talking about substance use, and that topic might be triggering for some people, but know that there is help available for you. You can always text the crisis line at 741741, and you'll be connected with a crisis counselor as soon as possible. Or you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That is 1-800-273-8255. 8255. And these resources are free and they're available 24/7, so please use them. I want to start with our Radio 101 student reporters. Chloe and Shalene, you girls work on a story about substance use, about a girl who had a really rough childhood and she found in drugs and alcohol a way out. And Shalene, I wanted to start with you, and if you could tell us a little bit about how you came up with this story and a little bit of the reporting process. What stuck out to you?
Yeah, we chose to do the story because we saw that where we lived and at school, and especially on the internet and social media, that a lot of teenagers were talking about using drugs and drinking alcohol and partying, and they were sort of making it seem like it was like a fun thing to do. Go out, party, drink alcohol, and we sort of wanted to shine a light on like the negative effects of drug and alcohol use.
Let's start by, I want to play an excerpt from your story. You are about to hear M. She's the student that was interviewed for this story. She's going to be describing her use of substances. Let's listen to it.
Easier to drink and forget than to deal with your problems. And I'm not going to lie, that's how it was in the beginning. It was great. It felt amazing. It was so nice not have to deal with that type of stuff. But God, it gets to you fast. Like, after a while, it starts to hit you harder. And then, the addiction type part starts rolling, like, where it's like, it's mid-afternoon, but I need a beer. The more tolerant I got, the more I smoked, the more I drank. So it definitely had an effect on my mental health, because whenever I didn't have those things, I was either like a horrible person to people, or I just never got out of bed. I didn't want to do anything. I wasn't doing well in school.
So in this audio, M is mentioning that it's easier to drink and to have this coping mechanism, I guess, or like this way out than like dealing with her problems. And I wondered, like, Dr. Boone, if we can start with you. How common is this when it comes to like substance use, especially with teenagers?
Well, unfortunately, it is very common. And the root of this can be found in adverse childhood experiences, which are 10 things that if they happen before your 18th birthday, then you can be more susceptible to using substances. The adolescent brain doesn't develop until someone is 25 years of age. And so sometimes we think that just because a child grows up this way, that they have everything that they need in order to be safe and secure, but that's not the truth. So peer pressure, media, all of the pressures that there are for young people, wow, what a time it is for young people today. So I hope that answers that question, and then maybe we'll talk more about adverse experiences a little later.
Yeah, definitely. And so could you help us understand basically when or if there even is a line where the substance use actually become a problem, or is like the second that you use them, that's it, you're done?
Well, that really depends a lot on the family history, because if there are people that suffer with addiction in someone's family, then it may be hereditary in terms of the susceptibility of becoming addicted to substances. And so there are some people who may try something one time and it doesn't really impact them. But when we understand that a child or an adolescent or even adult, if you will, uses substances in order to feel better about their lives, and it interrupts the daily routine. Like, instead of doing things that they would ordinarily do, they think about using drugs or do use drugs, then that's when it becomes a real problem.
And Dr. O'Malley, I wonder if you could help us understand a little bit about what are the mental health issues that could arise from a young person using substances as a coping mechanism?
Right, yeah, there are all kinds of things. Certainly we know that alcohol and other kinds of substances are really a toxin in our body. So it was mentioned that the adolescent brain is still growing and developing, and so really the last thing you want is some toxins in there getting in the mix and altering the way in which that brain is growing and developing. I think some of the other kind of secondary effects of that are it can certainly have an impact on your relationships, on your ability to participate in activities and experiences that are really important during adolescence. So say, for example, being on a sports team, and perhaps the using interferes with your ability to do that, and you can no longer be on that team, that you're missing out on a lot of what is really important in the growth process at that time.
I actually have a question for you, Dr. O'Malley. I was wondering why a lot of young people that have substance problems don't seek help.
Yeah, it's in general, as we know, it's just so difficult for folks to seek help about mental health issues in general. I think the extra trick with substance use is that we're kind of afraid we're going to get in trouble, right? You have to be very brave to be able to tell somebody that this is happening in my life, and I think it's getting out of control. And I do think we all worry about what the consequence is going to be. So I think it makes it particularly difficult to do that.
And one of the things that I want to come back to is that, Dr. Boone, you were mentioning, what we see on like social media, like the time that we live in. But one of the things that I've noticed, and we've been hearing this a lot, is that during the past year, just in general, grown-ups, we've been drinking more, right? They're like alcohol sales have been like going up. So if that is happening, then that is happening like at home, right? And what is the impact, not only that what we see on social media, but what is happening like at home and what kids are seeing like grown-ups do?
Mm-hmm. So prevention is extremely important, and one of the things that I always talk about has to do with parents and other adults modeling the behavior that they want to see children or other people in general have. So if at home there's access to alcohol, then that is a inroads into their child using alcohol. Parents may be going through some difficult times as well because of COVID, and their alcohol or substance use may be increased because of that. So they really need as much help as young people do. But if a parent is having challenges with substances or alcohol in particular, then that may be a challenge for the child. They see their parent not being able to cope. They can't cope. And so it's a very difficult situation. So one of the things that we talk about has to do with locking up or monitoring alcohol in the home so that it will not be as accessible to children.
And Dr. O'Malley, I mean, we talk about substance use, but when does it become an addiction? Like, what is the difference there between like using substances as a coping mechanism versus I have a problem?
There's a lot of kind of complicated brain chemistry that has to do with that, but our brain in general seeks out things that feel good to us, because in general they're good for our survival, right? So one example would be sweet foods, right? That sweet taste tastes good to us because generally sweet things are safe, as opposed to something that tastes bitter and that that's more associated with something that would be dangerous for us. So our brain continues to seek out, our brain is constantly seeking out things that it likes, and unfortunately some of the elements of the substances can become addictive in the brain, and then our brain wants more and more of those things. It gets sort of messed up with our chemistry and interferes with our ability to feel good with things that are actually good for us.
And I know that Shelley, you had a question, so I'm gonna let you ask that, and then.
Sorry. Dr. Boone, what are some of the red flags that a parent or peers, loved ones may be struggling with substance use issues?
Well, the challenges are challenges that we may not even associate with substances. Lack of communication, sudden changes in behavior, sudden changes in relationships, young people who have different friends that are hanging around that parents may not have seen before, a lack of interest in things that young people were interested in before, because substances actually hijack the brain. And what that means is that even though a person wants to do something that's fun or interesting, what clicks in the brain is, this is not fun to me. Food is not fun to me, relationship isn't fun to me. Doing things that a teenager would ordinarily love to do are not fun to me. I need the drug, I need the alcohol, I need the whatever the addiction is, and it may be addiction to social media.
Interesting. And you do mention at the beginning this idea of like adverse childhood experiences, and I wonder if you could touch on that a little bit, and then like we can discuss that with Dr. O'Malley as well.
Mm-hmm. So adverse childhood experiences refer to 10 things that if they happen before one's 18th birthday, and it can only be 4 or more, then it can cause disruption later on in life. So things like physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, parent treated violently, incarcerated relative, substance use in the home. And so these things, even though the brain forgets, the body remembers. And so it's actually, the trauma is actually stored in the DNA. And later on in life, it can cause severe obesity, substance use, alcoholism, drug use, missed work, alcoholism, I already said that, heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, COPD, and broken bones. Can you imagine? And so, but again, the body holds this trauma and it becomes a problem. But I will say that there are more adverse experiences than just childhood. There's adverse climate experiences that have to do with floods and things that people go through, but also COVID is called a climate experience. Adverse community experiences where a child or anyone may grow up in a community where there are not the same advantages as there are in others. And then there are atrocious cultural experiences that have to do with racism. And actually, ACEs now includes discrimination and racism as well. So put all of that together in terms of what young people have to deal with, adults have to deal with, and therefore there has been an increase in substance use and alcoholism.
And Dr. O'Malley, I mean, you work with children, and I'm guessing that some of them they go through some like hard stuff in life. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about your experience with this childhood adverse like experiences.
Yes, absolutely. And that in that study, as Dr. Boone said, was really the first research study to make the connection between adverse experience and physical health, right? It maybe seems obvious to us now, but at the time, it wasn't so much. And one of the things that I think has so much research started to take place after that initial study, and one of the more recent findings, Dr. Burke-Harris is part of this research, is that it really doesn't take until adulthood for those health problems to start. And so that's one of the things that we see in the children that I work with, that they have health problems that are much more frequent in adults, starting as young as 4 and 5 years old, having high blood pressure, asthma, diabetes. So it really doesn't necessarily even take a lifetime or an adult, a childhood for those negative experiences to start impacting our well-being.
Yeah, and I wonder, Dr. Boone, if you could talk a little bit about how do we create those safe spaces for people to be able to talk about these issues that they're going through?
I love this question. One of the things that's most important in terms of prevention or recovery, if you will, you can't get rid of ACEs. They're with you. I mentioned 10 things. I will admit that I have 9. And so when I was growing up as a teenager, I remember even suicide attempts and those kinds of things. So we need the space. But the way that we create the space is because usually when teenagers are teenagers, they don't want to talk to adults. They don't want to talk to their parents anymore. And so what we've done is to train young people as health advocates so that they can give the correct information to their peers. And then if there's something that arises out of that needs more attention, then an adult can become involved. So that's one way.
That's great. And Dr. O'Malley, if if right now a parent is listening to this and they might be worried about their kid using substances, what are some of the things that you would recommend them doing?
Yeah, I think often a great place to start is with your pediatrician, and I say that because they're generally if you have somebody you've been seeing regularly, there's some rapport and relationship there, and you might be surprised that teens often don't want to talk to their parents, but they sometimes, maybe more often, willing to talk to another adult, and particularly one that they've had a longer-term relationship with. So I think that's a place to start. And then generally, a pediatrician can help you to sort out, give you referrals to other mental health people that they trust and have a relationship with. We really want there to be a very good collaboration between physical and mental health providers. So I do think that that's a good place to start. There are also community mental health clinics that folks can access as well.
And in the previous segment, we did talk a little bit about social media and what the kids are seeing out there. And I kind of I wonder, Chloe, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about. You are experts in this because you are in social media all the time, and I wonder what is it exactly that you are seeing out there when it comes to substance use, and what is it that you found, again, when you were talking to your peers, when you were reporting on this story, what is out there in social media when it comes to substance use?
Well, when it comes to substance use, I feel like social media has become a huge outlet almost, because I mean, if you go on any platform, you're going to see someone underage doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And I mean, it's just become so normalized, and it's honestly crazy to me a bit, because I mean, it's crazy seeing your peers just drinking and getting drunk, and it's just so common, and it's all over social media, and it's almost like they encourage it because you see them doing that, and it looks like fun, and then it's everywhere, and so you want to try it.
But just touching on that, and I wonder, Dr. O'Malley, if you could help us out a little bit here, because how as a teenager, for example, right? You're seeing this. You're seeing your friends partying and drinking on social media or whatnot, and you want them to stop, right? But how do you position yourselves to be safe and not be the police? You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is a very difficult thing to navigate, and what I often see happening sort of early in the high school years is kind of a separation around sophomore year where you've got a group of kids that's really been spending time together, and sort of one set of that group that goes off and starts to experiment with alcohol and substances, and the other ones do not. And it's there's a mourning period for that. They're losing relationships. It's unfortunate that it often has to come to that in order to avoid those dangers. So I think a couple of things though is having exit strategies, knowing how to and practicing ahead of time how to get out of a situation that you perceive as being dangerous. Teaching young people to trust their gut. We now know we have our stomachs are our second brain. They have lots of neurotransmitters going on in there, and so when we get that bad gut feeling, to trust it and to again use your exit plan. To have a community of people, whether they're adults and young adults, that you're able to call. You can always call to get out of it. To call to come pick you up, to get you out of a situation. I think also if you're a young person whose those friendships are really important and you don't want to lose them because you're not interested in the same things, is creating and offering other alternate activities. And again, I think folks, you'll be surprised when there's something else to do that is fun and rewarding in a different way that your friends will get involved with that.
And Dr. Boone, since you work with teenagers who are struggling with substance use, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the way forward, right? Like what happens once you actually engage in like a treatment or just like in therapy or whatever it is that it takes for a teenager to get out of using substances as a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm. So I think the first question is for teens to ask, what is in this? So what is alcohol? Alcohol is a toxin. And to think about marijuana, is it really just green and from the earth, or are there things that can damage a developing brain? Vaping, what happens to the lungs? And so one of the first things, even when someone is struggling, is to make sure they know what they're putting in their body so that they can understand that, well, why am I doing this? The other thing is negative thoughts. It is amazing how young people or adults don't pay attention to the thoughts that come into our heads. It's like, okay, I'm just going to do this because I feel like it, or social media told me to, or a friend told me to. So it's kind of breaking up those norms that young people have. And then the stigma is something that we really have to address. We're talking about a child, excuse me. We're talking about a child and the impact that substance use. We're still talking about a child and a young person. And so we have to be gentle and considerate and non-judgmental when we begin to talk about these things. And that's where the conversation begins. And then helping young people get into treatment by, again, a peer being available. One of the things about ACEs, and it's probably my favorite saying, is that resilience, one of the keys to resilience, is having someone that's irrationally crazy about you. And that's what young people need that are addicted to drugs and want to quit. Again, remember, the brain is hijacked. So we can't expect them to just snap out of it. It's a long road that we have to help each other through.
And I like this idea of having someone who is your cheerleader, basically. But I'm kind of wondering, what happens when that person is not at home, right? I mean, like you don't have that person in family. What do you do? Where do you seek that person?
Well, where do you seek that person? You can seek that person through a trusted adult that's in the school, or a faith leader, or someone in the community to reach out to. So we may not think that there's someone that cares about us, but if we think about it long enough, there is someone. It may be an aunt, an uncle, an adult cousin, someone, and then we turn to that person.
And Dr. O'Malley, I'm wondering, like, from a psychological point of view, because here a listener is asking, what policy changes need to be made to protect, young people. But there's a law, right? I mean, you cannot drink if you are not 21. So, I mean, is a prohibition enough of a deterrent for young people to not use substances, or like what it needs to be changed, in order to have them make that click of maybe substances is not the way out?
Yeah, we have lots of research to show what works and doesn't work. Again, it's a long road, like Dr. Boone mentioned. It's not an easy.
Just say no doesn't work.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was the best. That was a good one. Right, and that it's not an easy thing because again, I like how you're using that brain is hijacked. It is not. It's not an easy one night, one day kind of solution. I think some of the things that we want to be thinking about is prevention. We know some of the things that will make it less likely for kids to start using drugs, being involved in an extracurricular activity, having dinner with your family. I can't remember how many nights a week it is, but it's not a lot. A couple of times a week, keeping your continue to be connected with your family prevents substance use. Again, having an adult person or somebody in your life who's crazy about you, I think that we can sort of be deliberate about that, creating these safety plans and prevention plans when our children are quite young, right? Let's not wait until the problem starts to begin putting things into their lives that are that we know are going to be helpful.
And we're talking a lot about, what can be done from like the family point of view. And I'm kind of like wondering, and I'm not sure like who wants to take this question, but basically what can be done in the schools, right? What's the role that like schools can play in all of this?
Wow. So trauma-informed schools are what we need. And what that means is that every child is treated with care. And It's not that schools don't want to do that, but remember that teachers and administrators have been through the trauma of COVID, just like everyone else, and so their attitudes may be a little different than they would be at other times. And so when we talk about ACEs and trauma, we need trauma-informed schools that help the adults in the schools lower their stress so that they can respond to students in a more positive way. And when that happens, then some of the stress and pressure that happens because of a regular school day can be a part of this process. Involving students in what the school looks like to them, how they take ownership, if you will, of the school. So this is my school. These are the things that I will allow at my school. These are the things I won't allow. And when that voice becomes louder than the voice of the literally fewer that are using substances and doing wrong things, then what you'll see is the movement of the social norm from the attention on young people that are doing those things that are unacceptable, wanting to be in the group of young people that are doing positive things.
Dr. O'Malley, anything to add to that?
Yes, I think the other piece is that, that fits along with what Dr. Boone is saying, and then you're also talking about policy, is there are such a thing as trauma-informed policies, right? So we're very punishment-focused currently, and if you think about it, if a child is caught using substances and then gets 10 days suspension from school, they're losing one of the most important connections to other people. They fall behind in school. They're sort of, in some ways, could very much be contributing to continued substance use. So it's really time for us to think about the way in which we respond. And again, we know that punishment is not particularly effective at stopping those problems. I think the other piece is when children do get treatment and that they're making some gains along that road, is making sure that we're able to support those gains by, again, allowing them back into extracurricular activities that perhaps they needed to be excluded from, making a plan ahead of time about what their peer relationships are going to look like. So oftentimes folks will get better, but they could be removed from the things that the pressures that may have caused the substance use. So again, making a plan to connect them as much as possible with healthy things in their school system.
That's great.
I was going to say there are also recovery high schools now in North Carolina. So if there's a young person that has challenges with addiction, then they're able to go to a high school that will support them as well.
Yeah, I always thought that it was kind of ironic, this idea of suspension, like for doing something wrong, so you can get out of school and do the wrong thing outside of school, right?
Does that happen like that? Yes.
My favorite was truancy, and then you get suspended, right? If you skip school, then you get suspended from school.
Well, I do want to thank you, Dr. Boone and Dr. O'Malley, for this conversation. I also want to thank our Radio 101 student reporters, Chloe Patterson and Shalene Sebastian. Thank you so much. And honestly, if anything, I feel like this conversation raised more question than anything, but that's the hallmark to me of a good conversation. It's like for the people out there who are listening right now to be able to go and get those answers, right? To go and have like those difficult conversations with their loved ones. So thank you so much for your time. And to the people right now watching, you can listen to the stories that the student produced. I'm a bit biased, but I'm going to say that they're pretty good. And you can catch them on our website, wftd.org/dispatches. And from WFTD, Call to Mind, and WETA, thank you for joining us for this Wellbeing Tour event. This is Call to Mind Live, Dispatches from Within, Youth Speak Out. Special program co-produced by WFTD and Call to Mind, American Public Media's initiative to foster new conversations around mental health. Our event is part of the Wellbeing Tour, a national public media initiative from WETA, focusing on youth mental health. And you can find resources that support youth mental health in our Wellbeing Toolkit. You can visit calltomindnow.org, wellbeings.org, or wftd.org/call to mind to find more information. please stay there. We do have a final few messages from our partners, and we hope that you'll participate in a brief survey to help us, make future events even better. And thank you for joining today. I'm Gabriel Maisonabe, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
The We Are Wellbeings story wall is a central part of the wellbeings.org website, social media platform, and the Wellbeings National Tour. We are asking the public of all ages to submit personal reflections, videos, photos, and short stories to offer hope, to foster understanding, to build community, and break down stigma.
What does being well mean to you? What is the one thing you wish people knew about mental health? What is your passion? What's your story?
Video can easily be submitted via social media using the hashtag #wellbeings or emailed to info@wellbeings.org.
Stories can also be submitted by uploading to Dropbox and live at Wellbeings Tour events. The We Are Wellbeings story wall is made possible through generous support provided by Wellbeings Youth Mental Health Project founding corporate sponsor Otska and Wellbeings media partner People.